Okay, time for some more illogic. Last time we went against Tyler and his Music City Mudkips. Please go check out the video first if you've not done so already. So we went over the team builder and battle in which, spoiler alert, the Buffalo Bouffalant notched another 6-0 victory. This one very much a team effort, from Talonflame burning key members to Gastro soloing the last two mons to Slitherwing using a fancy Terra Steel to resist Hurricane and Oko Iron Jugulus back with a Choice Banded CC. That secured our spot in the playoffs and brought our record up to 5-1 with a plus 27 differential, good for first place in the league. This time, we're facing off against Dash Dude, and the 3-3 Lorain Lairon timestamps will be in the description. Dash Dude has been a pleasant surprise this season. Previously, they seemed so close to a couple wins, but ultimately fell short and finished near the bottom of the league after the Bouffalant beat them, thanks in part to 3 KOs from Nidoqueen, plus a legendary performance from Bronzong. This season, they got a big win over the Route 1 Burbs early, and route to a 3-1 start, but dropped each of the last 2 weeks. Still, they were both 1-0 losses to very quality opponents in the Steamrollers and the Incineroar, so they've been pretty quality this season themselves. At the top of the speed tiers is Jolteon, followed by a pretty sizable drop-off to Chi-Yu and Staraptor, the former of which cannot Terra, then Krookodile, Glimmora, Quaquaval, Poltegeist, Iron Hands, Hippowdon, Dondozo, and Bronzong. Despite the speed gap at the top, plus a few types like Dragon and Grass missing entirely, this is actually a very tough team to try and prep for. Iron Hands, Hippowdon, and Dondozo are so stupid tanky, Poltegeist can sweep at a moment's notice as it has already done this season, Glimmora is a premier hazard setter, and good luck ever switching into Chi-Yu. Despite those difficulties and its good matchup against Gholdengo, I'm not particularly concerned with Krookodile overall. Strong EQ, Intimidator, Moxie, but it seems as though I have so many good matchups with it. Avila, Gastrodon, Azumarill, Wo-Chen despite CC, Slitherwing, Garchomp there, Lycanroc Dusk with this close combat. I've got a couple of fire types that can burn it too, not to mention that Talonflame is immune to the ground moves. No Crook this time, I think. Jolteon seems to struggle too. It really only gets the jump on a couple of my mons that may not be worth it for him to get, thanks in part to its shortcomings. 2 ground types that look good in the matchup, plus Wo-Chen and Toxtricity that'll resist electricity and can take advantage with free attacks. Nothing doing here. Now here's a real weird one for me to figure out. It seems as though I have a very good Bronzong matchup, but it may just have to come from being good into Garchomp in particular. Garchomp struggles to touch it at all, but otherwise, the fire types obviously hit the steel typing, Gholdengo and Wo-Chen with their stabs against the psychic typing, Slitherwing and Toxtricity pivot out easily despite the psychic weakness, Azumarill and Gholdengo don't really care about what it does. I'm just struggling to see what exactly Bronzong will do. Maybe Trick Room and Explode? That sounds kind of annoying actually. Poltegeist is an unreliable but explosive option and is one of my opponent's better options for normal spam, plus potential for a defensive strength sap set. Of course, Wo-Chen couldn't care less about what it does. Azumarill has the strong Aqua Jet. Things like Gastrodon and Garchomp and Arcanine can probably outtrade it, depending on coverage for Gastrodon, and as soon as I find out it isn't Shell Smash, Gholdengo can come in and bop it down. Finally, tough to cut thanks to the offensive potential here, but Staraptor may not do everything needed here, particularly hitting Gholdengo. I have a good priority here, but flying offensively is a bit of a struggle. Garchomp does look pretty good against it, as does Lycanroc offensively, obviously, plus a couple of options to burn it, and Toxtricity, which may be able to tank a hit and KO back too, at least from the flying and fighting moves that usually come out. I wouldn't be too surprised to see it come, but it's a bit tougher to say one of the above will be left off. Iron Hands, for example, is so tanky, which I think will play a little more into the game plan my opponent will go with their other top options here. I have a couple of decent answers, but Iron Hands can easily Terra to set up or tank a hit that it shouldn't, and those base stats lend to tankiness as well as the overall slow offense that can ravage things like Wo-Chen or Azumarill. There's some counterplay, but when it sets up a Sword Stance, those aren't exactly checks anymore. I think this is the scariest mon with Terra this week, and the one with the most outplay potential from my opponent. Quaquaval is similar, and could also Terra out of a weakness to help sweep with Aqua Step and Moxie plus Bulk Up, but if I don't give it a shot to move, there shouldn't be too much of an issue. Still, if it does start setting up, I'll have a hard time keeping it in check, especially considering almost all of my priority is resisted by water fighting. Hippowdon may seem odd to include, especially when it's missing Toxic and is hard-walled by something like Balloon Gholdengo, but the physical bulk of this mon is so annoying. Spammable body press with that bulk makes it an easy switch into most of my team. It's actually looking tough to break through without dedicated special attacks, and this is the less threatening of 2 mon that look specifically tailored to wall my physical threats. Plus, I think Hippo can afford to run rocks easily, when offensively, Glamora looks ridiculous to deal with. Stabs plus Dazzling Gleam, Energy Ball, Earth Power off of base 86 speed is absolutely ridiculous, not to mention I don't O-code this easily past Goldango and Garchomp, and it sets up Toxic Spikes on physical contact for free, or can remove hazards while removing poison thanks to Mortal Spin. Crazy Mon, just enough speed, power, and coverage to threaten me wholly. Chi-Yu is a monster. I have Resist, but how especially bulky do I need to be? Consider that max HP Azu can be 2-hit KO'd by modest Fire Blast. AV on Toxtricity doesn't stop Oko from some of the fire moves. And at base 100 speed, I'm struggling to find answers to Revenge. Imagine if it's Scarf, or with Specs it boosts past my walls, or with Boots I can't chip it into range and then it flame charges up. It's Uber for reason, but at least it can't Terra. Finally, Dondozo. I have access to Punk Rock, Overdrive, and Wu-Chen Silly Storm, yes, but these are incredibly predictable, and my best answers to Chi-Yu will be absolutely stuffed by the Dozo. Azu comes into Revenge, and what exactly am I going to do back to Dondozo? Arcanine in to tank a hit, doubled out to Dondozo. Okay, I guess I'll die. The issue is these two together. When Chi-Yu comes in, it should be able to claim a KO, and attempts to revenge it will be met with this monster, and that is a formula I am terrified of, so we'll need to play smart. That does mean Avalugg has about no place here. It's obviously roasted by Chi-Yu, aside from maybe a boot strat, but it's also stuffed by Dondozo, who with a helmet can even thwart the sturdy strat there. Glamora roasts me too, plus Quaquaval bulking up past me, Iron Hands swords dancing in front of me, and too much else to deal with. Lycanroc looks a bit interesting here. It outspeeds all but Jolteon, and Rock is super effective against big threats like Staraptor and Chi-Yu. But to look at the lower speed mons, Iron Hands, Hippowdon, and Dondozo laugh in my face. Taunt isn't going to help much when they all commonly carry multiple moves that can OHKO Lycanroc. Boosting up Stone Edge doesn't help when it's going to do 20% max to any of these three, so Lycanroc will be on the bench this week. Wo-Chen isn't walling much this week, what with the strong, super effective stabs from the likes of Chi-Yu, Glamora, Quaquaval, Iron Hands, and Staraptor. It's a decent answer to Hippo, Dondozo, and Poltegeist, but I don't know if it's worth it to try and make that work here, especially when the former two can just body press and Poltegeist may be the strength sap set anyways. Slitherwing is always strong, but it's tough to commit to when it's just a bit outsped by a few key threats and struggles to 2-hit KO Dondozo and Hippo anyways. Those are already easy switching to a couple of my mons. I'd rather not make it even easier for my opponent to wall my whole team with those, though I will miss that strong first impression. Finally, Arcanine just misses out, though I think it's pretty good here actually. Outspeeding most everything I'm worried about, and I love the idea of Terra Dark with Flash Fire for Chi-Yu, but I think I have a couple ideas of how to handle Chi-Yu that don't fall over to others. Quaquaval, Dondozo, Hippowdon, Glamora, just a few too many bad matchups, and potentially an over-reliance on Terra Dark to make it my Chi-Yu Poltegeist answer, so I'll pass this time. This was really tough to build, honestly, partially because I don't need to try too hard here with the playoffs locked, and Chad looming in the final week for the #1 seed. And partially because my opponent's team is really solid. I tried to cover what I could, but I'm not sold I hit everything I needed to. This Goldango, for example, maybe stretched a little thin with everything it's covering, with this max HP, max defense spread. Don't know if I'll ever go without Shadow Ball and make it rain, and then T-Bolt to guarantee the 2-hit KO on Fizdef Dondozo, and Recover to keep myself fighting strong. I should be able to tank hits from Dozo, Iron Hands, and Staraptor all day long with this spread, though I may be called in to take care of mons like Hippo if I don't come in on EQ, or Glamora if I can survive the follow-up Earth Power. Finally, this is my Terra Darkmon, not just for a Dark Pulse from Chi-Yu, but also for Poltegeist if needed. If that comes, I need to save this to help answer that Mon, and even that could be risky if I Terra early on a Shell Smashing and then eat the Terra right back. And if I don't Terra, you think I should try and tank that raw Shadow Ball? Even max HP? I don't like that, and I don't like my Fizdef answer eating that either. Don't think I have much of a choice though, so that'll be the set here. We'll move on to the only mon I want to be sure I am using early, and that is Garchomp, which can set up spikes or spam EQ against a team without Bronzong or Staraptor, neither of which I'm predicting to come. The power behind EQ should not be underestimated, even when I'm max HP with enough speed for the base 100, especially then when I outspeed everything but Jolteon, which doesn't even touch me. I'd like Garchomp to force switches, but also set up some spikes if I can, especially with the ability to force out Glamora in particular. Otherwise, Dragon Tail to stop setup mons for mons that I think Garchomp is too defensive to threaten out, and then rack up some spikes damage on them too. Draco is last. I didn't want to be locked in with Outrage, and Draco is actually doing more against those physically tanky threats like Dondozo or Hippo, with no fairies along with 2 grown immunities only. This should be a pretty spammable mon early, and if my defensive pieces are sufficient, I should be able to swap in and out of this mon to great effect, especially if I find out that Chi-Yu isn't Scarfed. Guess I should go over my other big defensive piece then. Is going to be this Gastrodon, which is the special defense counterpart to Goldengo's physical. Earth Power, as I said with EQ, is very spammable, even more so on the special side. With my opponent being so physically inclined, I can threaten some good switch-ins with the attack drop from Chilling Water, which should help me to tank hits with Recover. That's going to be especially needed with no leftovers. We've got a Rindo Berry to help tank an Energy Ball in a pinch and fire back with Earth Power against Glimmora. I said I'm scared of offensive Glimmora. This should be enough to show that. That should mean that I can take an Energy Ball from Glimmora and a modest Dark Pulse from Chi-Yu, which is pretty impactful. Stealth Rock otherwise, and the Terra Ground for a bit more oomph if needed, because I did mention that ground is pretty spammable. We're going to move on next then to Talonflame. Very straightforward as always, but we're going to try and use that Boots Gale Wings to revenge KO a little bit better this time. We're trying to make sure we put on a ton of pressure against Glimmora to prevent hazards from going up at all, as well as pressure the defensive pieces to make sure the only things that are beating us are my opponent's frailer mods. We got to put a ton of investment in attack here, thanks to the 26-point speed gap between us and the 100s. So Brave Bird should be slapping, potentially again boosted by Flying Terra. I admit I didn't really want to bring Talonflame, but Defog seems way too important against Glimmora that can destroy me by itself, and I think that Gale Wings gave it enough utility to work in this matchup. Willow for the slow physical attackers I suspect could be a problem, and my third mon with Recovery in Roost will finish it off. Hoping to save this for the late game, hoping I don't need to defog hazards and that I don't just get chipped away by Hip Out on Sandstream, which could break Gale Wings for Scarfs or a set-up Poltegeist. Let's head then to the less than standard set of the week. Azumarill does have Aqua Jet with Play Rough and an Adamant Nature, but they're going to be paired with Grass Knot and Encore planned with my 1-2 punch for Dondozo, which seems to be an obvious answer to Azu. Billy Drum sure would go in if it weren't for that Dozo, but I can't boost against, and Play Rough is doing about 20% to it. Grass Knot is actually a 3-hit KO against Helmet Dondozo, which I anticipate, and against something like Rest Talk, Encore should help me get in something like Goldengo safely. Terra Water for power on Aqua Jet, because look at the silly defensive utility we have in the matchup. Chi-Yu and Quaquaval struggled to touch Azu, and both get hit super effectively by my stabs, so I couldn't go full meme special attacking this week because I love the damage of Aqua Jet against the fast threats and need to be sure that I threaten those things that I can tank a couple hits from. Outspeeding no investment Iron Hands could be very helpful here too, and we could even potentially Encore Hippo's Slack Off and get good switches again. This may not look as powerful as other weeks, but the usefulness is too good to pass up. Finally, it's only taken its 4th appearance to change it away from Choice Scarf, but we've got ourselves a good old-fashioned set-up threat here. The only one I felt good about this time with Dozo staring me down. Shift gear up when I can, Overdrive or Boom Burst to grab the KO, and proc Throat Spray to give me that special attack boost. Terra Normal if needed to boost up that Boom Burst before or after the Throat Spray, and go off. If I don't think I can sweep yet, like I don't have the boost and Chi-Yu switches in at full health, I should only be doing about 75% to it, so I can Volt Switch out of it and try again later. I actually like my odds here, especially with mons like Dondozo that could easily be locked into a move from Encore, though maybe I could have gone something like Screens on Goldengo to facilitate this. I don't think this is my only win con, just the one that stands out the most. If this isn't the play, here's hoping Garchomp with Gastro's hazards, along with Garchomp and mons like Goldengo, can chip my opponent early to break holes later with things like the priority moves. Trade early to out-trade late. That's the game plan. Let's battle. No Iron Hands, no Hippowdon, fewer slow, bulky threats in favor of Crocodile and Poltegeist. Goldengo looks worse against no Iron Hands in favor of Crook, but is needed to stay healthy for Poltegeist. Iron Hands was also kind of an interesting candidate to set up on with Toxtricity if it was stabs with no EQ. That was definitely a free setup. Crocodile certainly doesn't give it a chance, and Poltegeist can actually survive a +1 overdrive. That could be a little bit of a problem. Azu's Aqua Jet looks to be the most important part of the game plan right now, and Gale Wings Talonflame looks to be really good right now too, so long as Dozo and Glimmora are taken care of. Rindo Berry on Gastro could be used on Poltegeist Giga Drain 2 in a pinch, and Garchomp hits these two way better than it does Hippo. Probably a positive overall then. Speaking of, I think Garchomp as a lead makes sense against a likely Glimmora, in addition to outspeeding my opponent's whole team at base and threatening spikes. Good luck, have fun to Dashtude, who is fresh off of a successful playoff match in another league with Xatu. It is Glimmora. Glad I got that one right at least. I'm actually quite afraid of this mon going off with Dazzling Gleam here and plenty of other coverage moves against everything else. So I think we should just go for EQ here. And if it survives on a Sash, it isn't going to spin anything away anymore so long as Roughskin has anything to say about it. Instead, it's going to be the Quaquaval coming in who will take 56% and leave it at half after the lefties. A decidedly good start for sure. This is, however, definitely not a favorable matchup with Ice Spinner threatening. Surely I can EQ again to KO, right? It isn't Scarf. but that may have actually been a favorable roll for me. I know that at worst I'd be trading 1-for-1 thanks to Rough Skin, but I foresee a much more useful roll for Garchomp later. I don't need to risk this roll right now. Not when I have a very free switch against Ice Spinner and anything else. Well, I have a couple actually, Goldango and Azu, but for the sake of keeping Goldango healthy for Poltegeist if needed, I'm going to try and go Azu early, as my opponent will also double out into the Dondozo, which is kind of interesting there. Preserve Quaquaval for a later time. On its face, this doesn't look great, but I'm more than willing to just fire off that Grass Knot to get some damage onto this guy here. Let's go. Does a third, perfect, and there's a Yawn coming off. This doesn't look like it's a curse set. It could be something more sinister, actually. And as much as I love Dondozo's design, I'm afraid I'm not sure what's coming next. At least I see the lefties there, so no helmet shenanigans going on, as I'm not setting up with Azu thanks to Yawn. I'm going to have to switch. Into what? I want damage to stick onto this. I'm going to trust my team a bit here, though, I think, and just go into Goldango. I just decided earlier I didn't want to go to Goldango due to the need to preserve its health, but it's definitely my best answer against miscellaneous sets and can threaten it out better than pretty much every other option I could use. Goldango in on Wave Crash. Oh, man, I did not want to see that. Some recoil, sure, but how am I supposed to set up on this? That even looks like that was a max roll on max attack adamant. That was a lot of damage. And now Goldango is hurt. Fantastic. But what am I supposed to do? I swapped in to get some damage off. I'm getting that damage off. My options are many. Crocodile could be the answer to Goldango, minus the Make It Rain. And with the damage I just saw, I think there's no shot I click that. Shadow Ball gets damage on anything, but is very much less than T-Bolt. I think I really do want to try and get that damage on Dozo here, so I think we're just going to go for it. No switch. Great damage there, and EQ does about as much as Wave Crash. I mid-roll here to emphasize the earlier max roll. Well, I definitely out-trade and can click anything to grab the KO, but look how low I've gotten after taking 2 hits for over 40% each. Not a good look there. And even with Azu doing 33% with Grass Knot, I don't mind risking Dondozo staying in a bit longer to make sure I get healthy again for later. And we're actually going to see that, yes, the Dozo is preserved in favor of Crocodile this turn. Pretty good play, but I really like the Recover as the nicer play there. Nice to see my Golden Boy smiling healthily. But now what? Talonflame could be nice for an obvious EQ, but Crunch is possible, and I want to preserve Gale Wings even more now with Dondozo this chipped. That means it could be sacked later, and Brave Bird gets one Glamora away from actually just about sweeping. Toxtricity, definitely no. Gastro, no. Azu's outsped. If that's the problem, then maybe Garchomp should be the play. I should be avoiding the 2-hit KO from Earthquake anyways, thanks to my HP investment and lefties. So we're going to go into the Chomp right now. Crunch, Defense Drop. Good news first, we get a little bit of chip there. That is Life Orb chip, in addition to Rough Skin. This is not a Scarf, so that's pretty nice. Bad news, that defense drop matters a lot. That doesn't look like it's even a roll to KO me with Earthquake without that defense drop, and now it's actually a guarantee. Well, crap. The hope was to set up a layer of spikes this turn, thinking my opponent may be threatened out by the EQ again into something like Dozo and clean that KO up with Draco before forcing in the Scarf, likely Chiyu now. Instead, we're not getting up spikes that easily, not when the Mon in front of us threatens the way it does. We outspeed at least, so we get our pick of what to click here. It's looking like either spikes as desired, which could be useful in having a chip gel full and chipping things here and breaking sashes, or Earthquake to do a hefty chunk to the crook in front of me. In my mind, I do still have a hazard left with Gastro in the back. I can probably either trade its life to get rocks up or KO the Glamora as it tries to spin them away. Probably a worthy trade if I can keep my other Mots healthy. In front of me, I'd like to get the crook into Aqua Jet range though, so Azu can be the follow-up. An easy choice, I think, considering my opponent's Dondozo is super chipped. Actually, look at Azu's current matchup. That's crazy. In that case, I need to sack Garchomp for the chip, and it goes down with Crocodile looking like a bit of a snack there. 5-6, and the second time I've been down all season, the only other time being the last turn of Week 1. As I said, Azu is the switch, and Aqua Jet is going to go into the Quaquaval. I should at least be able to take this thing out. I'm willing to eat whatever chip is being thrown at me. CC does, what, 30%? We can take care of that. Terra Water Aqua Step doing 30%. That's the same I mentioned before. And with it at 40%, Play Rough cleans that up easily. 5-5. Okay, not sure the reason for the Terra there. Maybe to get Azu in range of other stuff? We'll take it, especially since that means Poltegeist isn't going to be clicking Terra to get around a possible Terra Dark for me. As for the game state, Garchomp is down, Azu and Goldango mostly healthy, And for my opponent, Quackleval is down, Terra is down, and both Dozo and Krookodile are in dire straits. That looks like a leg up for me, but I'm going to need to keep playing smart to stay in the lead because they have so... Oh man, those mods in the back. Those 3 mods in the back are such big hitters left, and my plan of getting up hazards and clicking shift gear, not looking too great. To that end, Glimmora is going to be the answer for my opponent. And in addition to sacking the Garchomp turn, these next 2 turns I think were the biggest thinkers of the match for me. Glimmora in here, this is probably the biggest threat to my team. Even with Chi-Yu and Poltegeist in the back, the coverage on this mon is insane. And I no longer have my Garchomp to answer it with a ground move, only Gastrodon. Why is this in here now? It's to KO Azu, of course. I can chip down a bit with Aqua Jet, which would spread T-Spikes, do half, and have Azu go down. Chip is valuable against this yet, but... do you see what I'm seeing about Azu's usefulness? Aqua Jet getting Chi-Yu into Brave Bird range and taking a hit from the fish, hitting Poltegeist with a lower defense or breaking a sash, Aqua Jet KOing Crook. This might actually be my best mon in this matchup currently, and if that's the case, I absolutely need to keep it. Goldango is very useful too. It should survive on Earth Power in a pinch to KO this. It can be used on Dozo a little bit. It has the very valuable Terra Dark for an out-of-control Poltegeist, though I actually have some options there. Talonflame is my very best emergency button, and maybe needed to defog later for this mon's hazards. Toxtricity still actually has a shot to sweep here, though it's looking a bit hampered. Gastrodon walls this pretty well. Actually, that's the play I go with. I know Energy Ball is super effective already, but it doesn't actually KO from this range, and if my opponent has already seen Aqua Jet, they have to know that's an option, and that 2 Aqua Jets should be KOing from full, and in that case, Glimmora absolutely needs to KO this turn. Modest Energy Ball is a roll in my favor to not KO, meaning I find it very likely that Sludge Wave is the play here. Goldango is pretty good in that case, but between Gastrodon or Goldango, I obviously want to save Goldango. That, and if I could bait in the Energy Ball, I could Earth Power this to Oblivion, and if it's Sash, Azu comes in to do the same thing again, but without the Glimmora to revenge it. Gastro is going to be my play here. Hopefully that made enough sense. But it was Energy Ball. Again, in hindsight, maybe Goldango is the better play, especially if Gastro is healthy to chip things like Poltegeist. But this is very interesting here. My Rindo Berry helped me survive, right? That would have been an Oko otherwise. But that should be strange. I'm max Bedef, and while Glimmora is strong, this doesn't quite add up. A calc shows me that this is going to have to be Choice Specs Glimmora, which certainly would have KO'd Azu, wouldn't it? So this is Specs. Good information. Obviously, Gastrodon is going down if we both stay in, without doing much of anything, and while that isn't ideal, I think a plan is starting to form in my brain. Let's see how wrinkly this is. I'm clicking Recover this turn. If my opponent switches out, I'm back up to about full health, and what would it take to KO me? Another Specs Energy Ball by my math. So if my opponent switches out, I will be full, and go down to a Specs Energy Ball later probably. Why would that matter? Because I want the free switch into Toxtricity. I resist Grass, and that sounds like the absolute best opportunity to set up. I couldn't encore anything this match, but maybe this way. So if my opponent foresees something like this, predicting a switch into something else, let's say they swap into Krookodile, I could get the KO with Earth Power, yes, but then what? Chi-Yu threatens me with Dark Pulse. I can't freely switch into that. In this situation, instead, I threaten with the power of the free switch, which I think is something a lot of new players struggle with figuring out. In short, Toxtricity looks like it can get set up, and whether it wins or not, it can take down a couple mons with it if we've achieved my all-line objective there from the beginning, which was to just set things up so I could out-trade later. We're banking on my calc being correct here, too. Imagine if this is just like Meadow Plate and Modest, but probably this has to be Timid, because I think this needs to outspeed Goldango and Slitherwing. Oh, this is risky, especially without hazards being up. I really wanted to be able to get a hazard up here somewhere, but I think we're just going to have to do it. I'm going to click Recover. Nope, I just go down. Maybe I spent a lot of time explaining why I clicked Recover when it didn't matter, but the thought process may be valuable for some. Now then, Toxtricity time. Probably clicked it a little too quickly, but it's probably fine. Going to Tox means I'm going to click Shift Gear this turn. Good thing I'm not choice locked. There's a ground type and a ghost type. We're going to Shift Gear up. On the swap into Dozo. Thank goodness, that looks like that actually was Specs. See, that's good info. If I hadn't sacked the Gastro, I wouldn't have known that I could take this turn to set up. Okay, last chance to turn back. Volt Switch still KOs, but swaps me out of the boost, and does not yet proc the Throat Spray. No, we're going for it. We're going to activate the Throat Spray and attack. Boom Burst will grab that KO, and it will give me that special attack boost from Throat Spray. We are tied 4-4, but I'm primed to do some more damage up next. Poltegeist. Well, that seems absolutely correct. This could very well be Sash, and if so, we could be in trouble. Shadow Ball has a shot to KO me, so maybe I could Terra normal, but if it's Shell Smash, it could outspeed and KO me after, which it would do regardless, and I would love to have that Terra still in the back. Overdrive, actually not a good roll to KO either. I'm going to do it. I don't know if this was the right play, but I like the idea of being immune to Shadow Ball right here, right now. Overdrive does not KO. It's Shell Smash. Well, now we have an interesting point here, don't we? +2 Toxtricity versus +2 Poltegeist. We've EV'd to outspeed +1 Chi-Yu or Staraptor, while also sticking with a modest nature. While we naturally outspeed Poltegeist, if this is a timid Poltegeist, we've been had. It would not be out of the realm of possibility to say that +2 Poltegeist goal should be +1 Garchomp. I've brought Scarfchomp before, after all. If my opponent has foregone the timid nature in favor of modest, we always outspeed. If they've gone timid, we don't. From there, we could revenge it, but we're in big trouble after. Let's find out if we have to find out. We outspeed. We take out the Poltegeist. That's a big relief. It's only going to get easier as Chi-Yu's out next. Boom Burst is enough to take care of that, even without the Terra, and you already know the other two will follow. Glamora was a roll in my favor, worked out here. That's going to be a 4-0 victory for the Bouffalant. GG to Dash Dude. Some good stuff here for sure, but the Toxtricity, it's too strong. I'm guessing that was a modest Poltegeist. Didn't look like there was much bulk on there at all, and probably was a Focus Sash too. Tox outspeeds Poltegeist by a whole 5 base points. That seems pretty likely with the set, considering the stats didn't raise back up after Shell Smash. Again, probably a Sash. If I'd been outsped, probably would have had to go Azu or Talonflame and hope that the Chi wasn't Scarf. I think it was, though. I don't think I had enough sacks at that point. It would have been up to swapping between Goldengo and Azu on Glamora's locked-in attacks, I think, including probably doubling back to Azu. For example, swap to Goldengo on Energy Ball, then my opponent would have to go to one of the Dark types to sack, so I'd have to double back to Azu to take the KO on Crook and not have Goldengo immediately revenged. That sounds hard and sounds a bit like Talonflame wouldn't actually be all that useful now that I think about it, unless I were to use that too to switch between, but we don't have to worry about that. Instead, we can sing the praises of Toxtricity. I've been bold sometimes in my draft analyses, putting the league on notice or calling them out on various things. It's worked out recently, though. Last season, I said Kartana would be a KO leader, and it was. I said Nidoqueen would prove to be just as good as Nidoking. It was. And one of the things I mentioned this time was that Toxtricity has not been used particularly well in our league, and that I would take it upon myself to show what it can do. Well, what do you think after that? In addition to that, Azumarill took sole control of first place in our conference for KOs, just ahead of Goldengo in second place, so big shout out to them approaching the end of the regular season. Speaking of that, I guess we should talk about our standing in the league currently. With that W, we improved to 6-1 with a +31 differential, sitting at 41-10. That's good enough to keep our number 1 spot with 1 week to go, but the final week is against Chad's 6-1 Seattle Steamrollers. The winner gets the 1 seed. The loser is likely to finish either 2nd or 3rd, with the same first round opponent very likely. As it is, Michael's Route 1 Burbs have turned their entire season around after the big loss to me, going from 0-2 after a week 3 match to 5-2, including a huge win over those Steamrollers. As the Burbs have now beaten the Steamrollers not only here, but also in the season's 10 and 11 finals, Chad wants to take care of business with the Burbs early, preferring a quarterfinals matchup. As stated, with the gap below the Burbs, it's almost guaranteed the loser of my Week 9 match with Chad will face the Burbs in the quarterfinals. And considering my pride in attempting to hold on to the number 1 overall seed in the WCL, I want to win and get the number 1 seed in Johto. It seems that we both have something to gain here from a Bouffalant victory over the Steamrollers. So a meme match is in store for us for Week 9. Now, this was made in the far distant future of post-Week 9 WCL, so I can confirm that we had a glorious meme match, had a blast with it, but not necessarily something that fits with my usual content here, unless I had timed it to come out on April 1st, I guess. In any case, your Buffalo Bouffalant will end the season on a, quote-unquote, 7-game win streak to finish, quote-unquote, 7-1, with the number 1 seed. That also means that we'll face the lowest remaining seed in the quarters. Our playoffs are set up a little differently this season, such that the top 4 teams out of 9 are all guaranteed to get into the playoffs. Past that, every team past the 4 seed who is tied with the 4 seed in record will also make it in. The Incineroar had a chance to gatekeep everyone else out of the playoffs, but with their loss and a victory by all 3 other teams that were just outside, we have a huge play-in round in our conference. Again, though, as a result of us having the number 1 seed, we're the only ones not playing in them. The number 2 Steamrollers play the number 7 Psyducks, the number 3 Burbs rematch the number 6 Mudkips, and the number 4 Lairon and number 5 Incineroar face off. We'll be playing the 7, 6, 5, or 4 seed in the conference semifinals, depending on the lowest seed that is remaining. According to that means we could have another matchup against the same Lairon in the very next round, if everything goes according to current seeding, with the winner of the Lairon and Incineroar likely, but not guaranteed. We'll see you next time in the Wooper Club League Season 12 playoffs.